My name's Marc Hudson. I'm the editor of Manchester Climate Monthly, and carbon emissions is a big topic. There are natural carbon emissions, but from trees dying and things, and people breathing and things like that. But what's happened over the last couple of 100 years is that humans have started burning oil, coal and gas, which are called fossil fuels, in order to get energy, in order to cook a meal or drive a car or fly in a plane somewhere. And each of our individual emissions is just a tiny drop in a bucket. But if you put all those drops together over hundreds of years, it adds up to a lot. So the best way to think, the way that I like to think about carbon emissions, is you're lying in bed on a Sunday morning and you've got a duvet over on top of you, and you're not too warm and you're not too cold. And if you took the duvet off, you'd definitely be too cold. If you put another duvet on, initially it would feel quite good, but after a while you'd start sweating, you'd start getting hot, and you'd start getting uncomfortable. Well, there's a duvet of carbon dioxide, this invisible gas, around the atmosphere of the planet, and that's gotten thicker and thinner over millions of years. At the moment, what we're doing is we're increasing the thickness of that duvet, so it's getting hotter and hotter. And what that means is that there are more intense storms, there are more intense droughts, and so it's a real problem at a global level, and unfortunately also at a Manchester level. I think there are a few good reasons why we should be trying to save our carbon emissions. I think from a local and almost selfish point of view, energy's going to get more expensive. It's going to become more expensive to heat your house, to cook your food. Energy prices are just going to go up and up and up. So if you can take actions now to insulate your house better or to change your habits, what that will mean for you is less energy bills, and you'll have more money to spend on other essential things and hopefully some good things that you enjoy in your life. I'd also say that there's a bigger picture that we need to see here, and we need to think about people who are suffering from the consequences of our carbon emissions in other countries, who are suffering from increased floods, increased droughts. I'm thinking of people in Pakistan or Bangladesh or Somalia or Ethiopia, but also people who haven't been born yet, either in this country or other countries. They're going to live with the consequences of our carbon emissions, and they have no choice in the matter. So I think there's a short-term, obvious, practical reason: reduce your expenses on heating your house and cooking your food. But there's also a bigger picture of solidarity with other people in other countries, in the future, and other species on this planet. So the bad news for Manchester is that no matter what we do, there are going to be consequences. There is some academic work that's been done on this that was funded by the council and the university, and that what they're expecting, is quite likely, is hotter summers. Now that sounds great, but we're talking really hot summers, and in 2003 there was a heat wave in Europe where lots of elderly people died, so that's going to become quite possibly more likely. Warmer and wetter winters, so lots more flooding events where a month's rain falls in a day and our drains can't cope. So throughout Manchester there might be, in the summer, real nasty heat waves where you're worried about your nan and your uncle because can they cope with the amount of heat, and then in winter the drain's not coping. But I'd also like to say that the consequences of climate change go beyond the direct things that will happen within our city. Food will get more expensive in the same way that energy has, because if there's a big drought in the United States or Russia or Australia where the grain is grown, that will feed through into higher prices for bread, for meat, and all sorts of other things. So at the same time that people are experiencing problems with their energy bills, they'll also be experiencing problems with their food bills. On an even darker note, it's possible to imagine that there'll be wars fought between countries over access to water, access to food, etc. Now, there are lots and lots of communities in Manchester that have family in those countries, so it's quite possible, I'm not saying likely, but it's quite possible that the ill feeling will spill over into the streets of Greater Manchester. That's not an argument against immigration or anything like that, but we need to be aware that Manchester's part of a global network of people and ideas, and climate change is a global problem, there's a good chance that we'll see really quite unpleasant things happening in the world because of climate change. The big question obviously is, well, what do we do? So I've laid out a picture of potential catastrophes, and it'd be very irresponsible of me to say, oh, change your light bulbs. And unfortunately that's what does get said. There's this obsession around your individual personal carbon footprint, and I think that that's misguided, because yes, we can all do things to reduce our consumption, but I believe that we need to increase our political footprint at the same time that we reduce our carbon footprint. And by that I mean, in this country, we still have freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and freedom of information. And I think we therefore have a duty to act collectively in ways that force our politicians and companies to take climate change seriously. So that involves making sure that Manchester City Council keeps its wonderful promises that it has made about climate change. They say that they're going to try and reduce at Manchester level by 41% by 2020. They're nowhere near that. They say that they're going to reduce Greater Manchester's by 48% by 2020. They're nowhere near that. They also talk about creating a low carbon culture, but they've never tried to explain what is a low carbon culture. So if you're religiously inclined, well, what's your mosque doing? What's your church doing? What's your synagogue doing? What's your temple doing? Is your religious figure giving sermons and speeches about the stewardship of the planet? If not, why not? If you're part of a sports group, well, have you considered, is your clubhouse super insulated? Are you educating yourself and each other about these things? Have you created solidarity action with people in other parts of the world? If you're a student, well, are you being taught about climate change? If not, why not? This is the defining issue of the 21st century. And if you're a citizen who votes, I'm not advocating that you vote for any one political party. In fact, I would say that just going and voting once every year or 5 years and then expecting them to be honest and diligent, you're mad. You need to be involved in the political life of your city and your country by making sure that politicians can't give a nice headline promise and then do the exact opposite thing when media attention has moved on a day or two later. Now, that's all quite difficult, and it's quite difficult to do it on your own, so you really need to find some like-minded people and support each other, and that's what I mean by increasing your political footprint at the same time that you reduce your carbon footprint.